Remember all-wheel drive dirt bikes back in the 2000s? They were hailed as the future, the bold revolution that was supposed to change everything about off-road riding, the one feature that promised to rewrite the rule book. Of course, we know now it never really took off. But what most people don't realize is just how good these machines actually were, and how dangerously close Yamaha came to pushing this technology into the mainstream, changing forever what we thought a dirt bike could be. So, what happened? Back in the mid-1980s, Yamaha's engineers were already chasing the dream of putting power to both wheels. On paper, it sounded like a revolution waiting to happen. Better traction, more stability, and a dirt bike that could claw its way through conditions that stopped everyone else. But the first attempts were anything but graceful. These early prototypes relied on a purely mechanical system, chains, shafts, and a maze of pivots all working together to drive the front wheel. The idea was bold, but the execution left plenty to be desired. Every pound of extra hardware added bulk and complexity. Steering suffered. Suspension travel was compromised. What was supposed to be a sleek, agile off-road machine turned into a heavy, clumsy contraption that fought against its rider at every turn. Riders who tested those early bikes described them as awkward, more like experimental mules than real motorcycles. So, despite the ambition, those first AWD dirt bikes never made it past Yamaha's workshops. The dream wasn't abandoned, though. It simply needed a better solution, something lighter, smarter, and far more refined. And that next chapter was just around the corner. By the early 1990s, Yamaha realized brute force mechanics would never deliver the breakthrough they wanted. If all-wheel drive was going to work on a dirt bike, it needed a completely different approach. That's when they turned to a partner already close to home, Öhlins, the suspension specialists who also happened to be under Yamaha's wing. This was more than a casual experiment. Öhlins threw themselves into the project, dedicating nearly a third of their research capacity to finding the answer. Instead of bulky chains and shafts, the engineers reimagined the system around hydraulics. Lightweight, compact, and far less intrusive on a motorcycle's frame. They called it Trac, and it was unlike anything the dirt world had seen. Power from the gearbox would no longer grind its way forward through metal parts. Instead, it would be transferred cleanly through fluid pressure, controlled, precise, and remarkably simple in concept. For Yamaha, this was the moment when a half-baked idea began to look like a real possibility. The dream of a true two-wheel drive motorcycle wasn't dead after all. With Öhlins on board, it had just been reborn, and the world was about to see proof. By the late 1990s, Yamaha and Öhlins were ready to take their creation out of the lab and into the dirt. And they didn't start small. They rolled the Trac system straight into competition, the ultimate testing ground where theory either proved itself or collapsed under pressure. The first public trial came with a YZ250 motocross machine fitted with Trac. At the Gotland Rally in Sweden, it didn't just perform well, it won outright. That was enough to raise eyebrows. A short time later, Yamaha tried again with the TT600R. Entered into the Sardinia Rally, the bike stormed to a class victory, once more proving that this strange hydraulic drive had serious potential. One of the men behind the project was Jean-Claude Olivier, legendary Dakar rider and Yamaha France boss. Olivier wasn't content to just push papers. He threw a leg over the saddle himself, determined to see how the system behaved under true rally conditions. His belief in the project gave it credibility. Then came 2001 and 2002, when French rider David Frétigné took the WR450F and later the WR450F equipped with Trac into the punishing stages of the Dakar Rally. Against factory machines with 660cc and even 950cc engines, his 450 looked outgunned. Yet in the deep sand and endless mud, the little AWD Yamaha clawed ahead, winning stages and even leading the rally at times. What had once been a wild idea was now winning races. The revolution didn't seem so far-fetched anymore. So how did Yamaha and Öhlins actually make two-wheel drive work without turning a dirt bike into a lumbering science project? The answer was as clever as it was simple: hydraulics. Instead of running chains and shafts up to the front end, they mounted a compact hydraulic pump above the gearbox. This little pump was driven by a short chain, taking a fraction of the engine's output and converting it into fluid pressure. From there, two flexible hoses carried that pressurized oil forward to a small hydraulic motor tucked neatly inside the front hub. The system was completely self-contained, closed, automatic, and smart enough to regulate itself. Under normal riding, the rear wheel did all the work. But the moment it began to spin and lose grip, pressure built up in the circuit, sending power to the front wheel. Up to 15% of the engine's drive could be shifted forward, but never more. The design made sure the front wheel would never outrun the rear, keeping the bike predictable and controllable. In practice, it felt almost like traction control, except instead of cutting power, the system simply redirected it. When the rear stopped pushing, the front started pulling. The result was seamless, subtle, and brilliantly effective in conditions where traction mattered most. What made Trac so impressive wasn't just the engineering, it was the way it transformed the ride. Suddenly, corners felt different. Instead of the back end sliding wide and forcing the rider to fight for control, the bike carved a cleaner line. The rear wheel still powered hard, but the front helped pull the machine around, making every turn smoother, sharper, and more precise. In sand or mud, terrains that usually swallow dirt bikes whole, the system was a revelation. Where other riders spun helplessly, the Trac kept clawing forward, distributing grip to whichever wheel could find it. And the beauty of it all was that the rider didn't have to think about a thing. No levers, no switches, no second guessing. The system was fully automatic, stepping in only when it was needed. For beginners and intermediate riders, that meant confidence. The fear of losing the rear in a corner or getting stuck in deep ruts faded away. Even casual riders could push harder, knowing the bike had their back. And because the setup was compact and adaptable, Yamaha hinted it could be fitted to many different models without redesigning the frame. On loose surfaces, riders reported higher cornering speeds and even a bump in top-end pace. It was, in every sense, a game changer, at least on paper. For all its promise, Trac had a dark side, and once riders got past the novelty, those flaws became hard to ignore. The first problem was weight. The hydraulic motor, hoses, and pump added about 15 pounds, most of it sitting right up in the front hub. That extra heft made the bike feel nose-heavy, dulled the steering, and made lofting the front wheel over logs or ruts a chore. For seasoned riders who thrived on agility, it felt like the bike was fighting them instead of flowing beneath them. Then came quirks no one expected. Because the system was tied directly into the gearbox, jamming the front brake too hard could sometimes stall the engine, an unnerving surprise on the trail. There were even reports of the front suspension locking under certain conditions. None of these were deal breakers by themselves, but they chipped away at the magic Yamaha had promised. And then there was the cost. Building Trac required precision machining, which meant the production bikes carried a staggering price tag, around $12,000 to $12,500, nearly double a standard WR. Worse yet, Yamaha played it safe with a limited run of just 250 to 445 units, killing any chance of economies of scale. The market didn't bite. Beginners praised the stability, but experienced riders dismissed it, claiming the system stripped away the raw freedom that defined dirt bikes. By 2007, Yamaha quietly pulled the plug. The future they had envisioned never arrived, and Trac slipped into the shadows. In the end, Yamaha's Trac stood as both a triumph and a tragedy. On the one hand, it proved beyond doubt that two-wheel drive on a dirt bike could work. It won rallies. It conquered terrain that left competitors spinning. It showed the world that a 450 could challenge and even beat machines nearly twice its size in the toughest conditions on Earth. And yet, the very things that made it innovative also doomed it. The extra weight, the steep price, and the unusual feel kept it from winning over the masses. Riders admired the idea, but few were willing to pay for it, or to adapt to a bike that felt so different from what they knew. By the time Yamaha pulled the plug in 2007, Trac had become less a revolution and more a fascinating footnote, a bold experiment that proved the concept was real, but not ready for the mainstream. Today, it survives as a story, a reminder of how even the best ideas can falter when the market isn't ready. So maybe Yamaha's Trac was never destined to rule the dirt. But it came closer than most experiments ever do. It worked, it won, and for a brief moment it looked like the future was here. Then, just as quickly, it slipped away, leaving behind one of the most intriguing what-if stories in motorcycle history. What about you? Do you see two-wheel drive dirt bikes as a failed gimmick, or as a brilliant idea that simply came too early? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this ride through history, don't forget to hit like, and be sure to subscribe so you won't miss the next journey into the machines that shook our world.